For the past few years, it really felt like U.S. home prices could only go one way, up. And I mean, way up. But according to some brand new data, a major shift is happening right now. The housing correction, the one we've all been talking about, well, it's officially begun. And in some of America's biggest markets, the price drops are already getting pretty serious. Okay, let's get into it. So to really understand what's happening now, you first have to appreciate just how insane the run-up was. Get this, in Collier County, Florida, that's where Naples is, prices skyrocketed by a staggering 82% from the middle of 2020 to their peak. I mean, the source material just calls this kind of thing nuts, and honestly, it's pretty hard to argue with that. And that's really the big question, right? When you see numbers that high, when a market gets that hot, you just have to wonder, how long can this possibly go on? Well, it looks like we're finally starting to get the answer. All right, so before we dive into the price drops that are happening today, let's just quickly set the stage with the pandemic housing boom. The source we're looking at describes these price surges as mind-boggling, and as you're about to see, that's not an exaggeration at all. And this chart really just captures the absolute frenzy. From mid-2020 to their peaks, prices in Sarasota County, Florida shot up 70%. Right next door, Lee County up 69%. And then you have Phoenix, Arizona with a 60% surge. This wasn't just some steady market growth. This was a straight-up explosion. And that brings us to the main event, because after the frenzy, well, you get the hangover. The new data is making it crystal clear. The bubble is starting to deflate. In at least 14 major U.S. markets, this correction we've been hearing whispers about, it's not a theory anymore. It's here. Okay, let's just look at the raw numbers. Oakland, California is leading the charge with a massive 25% price drop from its peak. Austin, Texas, another one of those huge pandemic boom towns, is right on its heels, down 24%. And this is happening from coast to coast. New Orleans is down 19%, Manhattan is down 16%. And hey, remember those two Florida hotspots, Lee and Sarasota counties? Both have fallen 16% from their highs. Okay, so let's zoom in a little on these numbers. I mean, what do these percentages actually mean for people living in these markets? Let's take a closer look at the cities and regions that are really feeling the impact right now. So let's start with Oakland, just to see the real-world effect. After prices just went ballistic, up 236% over a decade, this 25% drop has completely reset the market all the way back to 2018 levels. Just think about that for a second. 4 years of absolutely frantic gains have been totally wiped out. Gone. And it's a really similar story in other places too. Take New Orleans. The entire 23% price spike that happened during the pandemic has been erased. It's like the last few years of housing craziness just never happened there. Now for a really dramatic before and after, let's go back to Florida. First, here's the boom. From 2020 to 2022, Lee County and Sarasota County were just on fire. Prices exploded by nearly 70% in just 2 years. This was the absolute poster child for the pandemic housing bubble. And now, here's the after. Today, those exact same two counties are number 1 and 2 in the entire country for year-over-year price declines. Both are down over 10%. The speed of this reversal from boom to correction is it's absolutely stunning. So we've seen the really dramatic examples in places like California, Texas, and Florida. But this isn't just a few isolated markets going through a correction. The data shows a much, much more widespread cooldown is taking hold across the whole country. Yeah, that list of 14 cities with the double-digit drops, that's really just the beginning. There are a whole bunch of other major cities right now that are knocking on the door of that 10% decline mark. And here's just a quick look at some of them. You've got Mesa, Arizona, and Portland, Oregon, both down 9% from their peaks. Sacramento and Seattle right behind them. And even those darlings of the boom, like Boise, Idaho, and huge markets like San Diego and LA, they're all posting some pretty significant declines. This is clearly a national trend. Okay, so we've looked at a ton of data, and it's all pointing to a national cooldown. But what does all of this actually mean for you? Let's try to connect these numbers to the real world, to affordability, and that age-old question, is it better to rent or is it better to buy? A commenter on the source article, a guy named Andy, he really just captured the dilemma we're in perfectly. When the monthly cost to own a house is more than double the cost to rent the very same property, the traditional math just completely falls apart. It creates this huge, huge financial disconnect. And this really gets right to the heart of that disconnect. On one hand, you could own, which means really high mortgage payments, plus the added risk that your home's value is actively falling. On the other hand, you could rent, which means lower payments and zero risk of losing value, but you're not building any equity. In a market where prices are dropping, that risk of ownership just becomes so much harder to justify. And as another commenter pointed out, this whole environment is starting to flip the traditional wisdom completely on its head. For decades, the strategy was to buy and hold real estate for those long-term gains, right? But right now, with prices falling, the market dynamics actually reward selling, not banking on some speculative return down the road. Which leaves us with the big $64,000 question. Are we just watching a healthy, necessary correction, a soft landing that brings prices back down to more sane levels? Or is this the very beginning of a much longer, maybe more painful slump for the housing market? The data clearly shows a major shift is here, but only time is going to tell just how deep this thing goes.